Oh, welcome everyone. I've seen a few familiar faces. Lovely to see you, and some new people. Always lovely to see new people, and a true delight to see so many women, but men, you are equally as welcome to this session today, because we're all about equality and learning from each other. Just going to wait a couple more minutes because we know we've got a few people who are now trying to get in. Just as whilst we let people in, as a reminder, we will put you on mute, but if you can put yourself on mute, that is great. We also have got captions, so you should be able to see captions should you need that. And as you will have noticed as you walked in, you know what I mean, that we are recording this for those people who can't attend tonight. Um, because we have three esteemed guests, we are going to be prompt and start. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Emma, as you can see on the screen, and I am the Chief Executive of Make Votes Matter. And I am really excited about tonight because one of the reasons that I came to Make Votes Matter is I think it's really important that people like me see other people like me in jobs like this and in politics. And we are still way off equal representation in the UK and other territories. And I'm sure my colleagues tonight will tell us a bit more about that. We've really fortunate to have three fantastic speakers who have given us their time to talk about equal votes and women in politics. We have the Senator for Ontario, the Honourable Donna Dasko. Thank you, Senator. We also have Christina Olumeko, who is our Danish representative. So thank you. I feel like I'm in the Eurovision Song Contest for those of you who know Eurovision, introducing people. And finally, and not at all least, is Dr. Kathryn Lum, who is also going to share some of her experience about anthropology, which is very exciting for many of us. We are going to have plenty of time at the end for questions, but as you know, we love you to use the chat box. So if you're thinking of questions, do write them in there. If I may, I will ask the Senator to open the proceedings and share her thoughts about equal votes and women in politics.
Well, thank you, Emma. Please, everyone call me Donna. That would be best. So, very pleased to be here today. It's 2 p.m. in beautiful downtown Toronto, and I'm really pleased to be here. We are in Parliament now. We're in a state of prorogation. If you're part of the British system, you may know what that means. We're in a break in Parliament, and we are expecting a federal election to be called this Sunday for sometime in April or May. So, very exciting political times here, not to mention the fact that our neighbor, the American president, wants to annex my country and has also imposed debilitating tariffs. So just, those are the sorts of things that we're having to deal with here in Canada. So in any case, I just happy to be talking about women in politics. I've been involved in an activist trying to get more women elected in Canada for over 3 decades. I was in the polling industry, and became very interested in the gender gap differences between men and women and their opinions, and that's one of the ways I got involved in my interest in women. Way back in 2001, many years ago, a whole group of us got together and we formed an organization called Equal Voice, which grew to become, and still is now, Canada's largest NGO that focuses on getting more women elected. So it's still going strong today, and very proud that it's still going on. I was national chair, one of the founders, and then national chair of Equal Voice for 4 years. And my focus when I was involved was to get the political parties to try to nominate more women. But we did a lot of other things as well. So activist in this area for quite a while, and pushing the rock up the hill, so it goes. Why do we need more women in politics? The first and main reason is that we need to have equal representation. Women should be represented in our parliaments in numbers at least equal to men. It's a matter of basic representation, basic fairness. We are 52% of the population, and we need to have our voices there. Even the UN, the United Nations, has moved its goalposts for women. They used to set a target of 30% women for parliaments and legislatures. Now they have moved the goalposts and they say nothing less than equality is acceptable. And that's what I feel for my country and for every country in the world. Having more women in politics means that women can actively participate in decision making, and their decisions will affect not only themselves but the entire society. And that is why we need to have more women in politics. I also know from my experience in the polling business that women, not all women, of course, but women tend to be interested in certain issues more than men. And so if women's voices aren't there, those issues aren't as represented. They're not as prominent as they should be if we had equality. So I know that there is this gender gap, and I've seen it many times. Women are more interested in healthcare, education, social services. Women are more likely to see a role for governments in these social policies. And so that's one area. And of course, we know about the differences in leadership styles between men and women. Not all women, not all men, but there are differences. And if we had more women, those leadership styles, more consensual leadership styles, we would see that in our parliaments more than we do today. And for my country, it's embarrassing. Canada has a very high quality of life, standard of living, and we rank very highly on all these dimensions. And yet, we are 69th in the world when it comes to representing women in our federal parliament. Our parliament is only 30% women. And to me, I find this to be a real embarrassment, and my country should be doing more. So what's the problem? Well, we can't blame the voters, at least not in Canada. All the research shows that if factors are equal, the voters are equally likely to vote for women as men if they're running in equally strong ridings and so on. So we can't blame the voters. We can't blame women for not stepping forward. Sometimes, the political parties will say, oh, we can't find any women to run. We've looked all over the place. Well, no, they haven't. Equal Voice did a survey, and they found that 14% of all Canadian men had been approached to run for office, but only 7% of women had been approached. So it's double the number of men. So in fact, they haven't actually done the outreach. There are plenty of women who want to run for office. In Canada, 734 women stood for office in our last election. That's 734 that we could fill 2 full parliaments with just women, just with the number who actually ran in the last election. So women are there. I do understand that the violence and the bullying against women is definitely a factor. It's something to be talked about, but I just want to make the point that people can't just say, we can't find the women to run, therefore we're just going to throw our hands up and say, oh whatever. The barriers, I think, are institutional barriers. We have an electoral system that is not conducive to electing women. Our system is first past the post, same as we have the Westminster system. PR systems are better. They are better for women. Typically, if you look at the top 10 list of countries in the world, you'll see that every one of those countries has some form of PR and also some form of gender quota. So Canada has neither. When it comes to PR, however, it's been a tough tough slogging here in Canada. We've had our Prime Minister Trudeau said he wanted to change the electoral system when he was first elected in 2015, and then within about a year he said, "Oh, gee, I don't think I'm going to do that anymore," so that kind of fell flat. We've had referendums on PR. We've had 7 referendums at the provincial level on PR, and none of them have been successful. So we have, I'm not sure what we can do. We can keep working at it, but meanwhile, I think I've been pressing the political parties to do more, and I think that the political parties should be setting their own, setting quotas, setting levels. They should be nominating more women, especially in winnable ridings. And just to say, as a senator, we have the ability to introduce our own bills. So they're hard to pass, unfortunately, very hard to pass. But I did propose a bill in our Senate last year, at the beginning, just over a year ago. And that bill is kind of on the modest side because I thought, you have to strategize about these things. I thought it would be better to start modestly. It calls for data collection by our chief electoral officer. We don't even have data collection on the diversity of our candidates. And it also calls for parties to inform Canadians about the policies and programs they have to increase diversity. And that includes not just women, but more diverse candidates with regard to racial background, indigeneity, and a couple of other characteristics. So my bill would do that, would create the transparency, would require parties to tell Canadians what they're doing. We already do this for corporations. We require corporations to tell Canadians their plans for senior management and board members on the large corporations in Canada. And so we have precedent for it here. And so I think we should, if we're doing this for corporations, surely our political parties can meet the moment and can do that as well. Now with prorogation, all bills are gone off the order paper, just disappear. However, there will be a new parliament after our election, and I have every intention to introduce this again, and we'll see how it goes. So I think I'll throw it back to you, Emma, and look forward to the comments of others. I say we are I'm working away, and there are many people of goodwill in Canada, women and men, who want to see this, and I'm hoping for progress in the future. So.
Thank you so much, Donna.
Okay.
We're hoping for progress for you too. There's already lots of questions, and particularly about how people vote in Canada, so we will return to some of those. I'd like to now welcome Christina Olumeko to speak. Christina is a member of the Danish Parliament and has got an amazing CV, but I'm going to let her talk because I don't want to take up too much time. Christina, over to you.
Thank you so much. And good evening, everyone. My name is Christina Olumeko. It's a pleasure to be here today and contribute to this important discussion on electoral systems and their role in promoting fair representation, particularly for women and minority groups. As a politician for the alternative Danish Progressive Green Party, I'm excited to share insights into how the Danish electoral system fosters inclusivity and supports our parliament in reflecting diverse voices of society. So just to start off, just a few words about our electoral system in Denmark, just for those of you who may not know it. Denmark operates under a proportional representation system, a PR system, and the PR system ensures that the parliamentary seats are distributed according to the percentage of votes each party receives. So unlike majoritarian systems where the winner takes it all, our systems allow for a more accurate reflection of voter preferences, leading to a multi-party democracy. And our electoral system is combined with a low threshold to get seats in parliament, which means that we have many different political parties in our parliament. So at the moment we have 11 political parties with different platforms and political priorities in our parliament. And our proportional voting system relies on larger constituencies that elect more than one MP. So as such, Denmark is divided in 10 constituencies where many MPs are elected. And this allows to fill numerous candidates within the same constituency, and most parties will try to include various candidates in order to appear. When it comes to list systems, the political parties can decide for themselves whether they want to be an open list or have a closed list. So an open list system means that the voters decide entirely which candidates are elected to the parliament. And the closed list system means that the party alone decides which candidates gets the seat in parliament. And all parties in Denmark, except just one party, uses the open list system. I think one of the key benefits of our electoral system is that it creates opportunities for smaller parties like my own party and also underrepresented groups to gain representation in Denmark. Denmark has consistently been among the leading countries in terms of gender equality in politics. Currently, women make up 43% of the Danish parliament. And I think this high percentage is a direct result of our system as it encourages political parties to fill the balanced list of candidates, including women. Additionally, several political parties like my own actively promote gender balance and diversity through mentorship programs and internal policies aimed at ensuring that women and minority groups are encouraged and supported in their political careers. For instance, in my party, we have a rule that a woman should always be among the top 2 candidates at every list. And I think policies like these are a crucial element of achieving meaningful representation beyond just the electoral system itself. So political parties that recognize the importance of representation try to recruit candidates from different ethnic, cultural, and social economic backgrounds to better reflect the Danish society. While Denmark has made some progress, actually a lot of progress, when it comes to increasing gender representation, we still have some challenges, especially when it comes to ensuring that ethnic minorities and other minority groups are represented in our parliament. We have a large underrepresentation, for example, when it comes to ethnic minorities and people with disabilities, but also when it comes to age and education. And when we look at the party memberships, very few Danes are member of a party. So we still have room for improvement. And just to zoom in at my own party, we are the Danish party in parliament with the most women elected. Actually, I think it's about 80% of our group that is women. So we're actually discussing how to get more men elected for our party. And I'll also be honest to say that my party have some problems when it comes to ethnic minorities. I'm the only ethnic minority in my party when it comes to politicians. Our focus is trying to get more people, especially minorities, into the party. And we also work on trying to combine our proportional system with a deliberative system. So we're trying to experiment with citizens assemblies and so on, because I think while you have other problems in the UK and Canada, I think the problem in Denmark is that people leave the parties, so we have to make other platforms for people to engage in. But just to finish, so the Danish electoral system is a powerful tool in creating a diverse democracy, and while we'll still have some challenges, it provides a strong foundation for ensuring that women, minorities, and a wide range of political perspectives are included in democracy. So thank you, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you so much, Christina. And if you look in the comments, there is someone who is speaking Danish in those comments. So that's nice, isn't it? I think you might have noticed that both Donna and I sort of like looked so jealous when we saw like you have, you know, all these women and such a great system. But I like to hear that you still think you can learn and you can develop more. And I think that's the thing about democracy, isn't it? It's not just a moment in time, it's always a journey. Our last speaker today, last but not least, is a very busy woman, anthropologist and a gender equality trainer, and very jealous because she's a visiting professor in Brazil at the moment. And I'd like a bit of that Brazilian summer. So, Kathryn, can we hand over to you and hear a bit about your work?
Thank you very much, Emma. I'm really happy to be here this evening with all of you. Thank you very much, Sally, for inviting me. I want to just briefly share with you my personal journey, because I was born in the UK and raised in Canada, both in English-speaking and French-speaking Canada. As a young adult, I then I left the UK, and I first was living in different continental European countries, all of whom had PR. And for the last 5 years, I have been living and working and teaching in Brazil, which mostly has PR except for the Senate. And what I want to speak very briefly about is the experience of Brazil and Mexico. Why these two countries? Because both have almost 100% PR. There is a bit of first past the post in both countries, but it's vast majority PR, and they both have gender quotas. Latin America, despite the fact there's such huge rates of violence against women, domestic violence, sexual violence, in terms of political representation, Latin America is the region that has made the most progress over the last decades, and also that has the highest level of political representation overall in terms of just regional. And a big part of that is due to two reasons: the electoral systems, PR, combined with gender quotas. But if you are based in the UK and thinking, okay, we need PR. With PR, we're going to improve women's political representation. I want to speak about these two countries to show that you can have gender quotas, and quotas in Latin America, it's not a dirty word. You don't seem to have a knee-jerk reaction. It's just an ordinary word, quota. And in Brazil, there's both gender and racial quotas. So it's just seen as this is just something normal, and you have quotas across a number of fields, not just in politics, also in government jobs, in higher education, etc. So both Brazil and Mexico, around the same time, 10 years, they both introduced quotas, gender quotas. They were optional at first, and they are both around the same level. So 20% in Brazil and 30% in Mexico. But today, Brazil only has 15% female political representation, which is one of the lowest in Latin America, one of the lowest in the world, in fact. So it's actually appalling. It's very embarrassing, especially given the fact that you've got this combination. You've got quotas and you've got PR. Mexico has 50% female political representation. The first time this was achieved was in the 2018 elections. It's one of a select group of only 6 countries in the world who have achieved gender parity, 3 of whom are in Latin America, Latin American Caribbean, if you include Cuba. So you've got the other 2 being Nicaragua and Cuba. So my question is, why this disparity? What did Mexico do differently? And this comes to, I think, a point also that Senator Dasko mentioned, which was about the need, and something I really emphasize. We need to embrace the commitment to gender parity, and that's what Mexico did. It wasn't 20%, it wasn't 30%, it wasn't 40%, it's 50%. It's gender parity, even though technically there's a slight demographic edge, but it's gender parity. And in the 2019 constitutional reforms that Mexico undertook, that was a term gender parity that was extended to every aspect of government. So every level, every aspect, including the judiciary. So it was just a general principle. It's enshrined in the Constitution, but it's also quite strongly implemented and enforced. And the last barrier to fall were the governorships. That was the last holdout. Because initially, if you look at Brazil and Mexico, the parties constantly, at every step of the way, they were resisting and finding loopholes. In Mexico, the weak link were, surprise, surprise, the single member districts, which are elected with first past the post. That's where the parties found wiggle room. And progressively, Mexico just started closing the loopholes. And then now with, embracing gender parity and 50%, there are no more loopholes. And I want to just stress that this comes to something also that Deputy Christina mentioned, that the key difference between PR in Brazil and Mexico is that Brazil has open party lists, and Mexico has closed lists. And research consistently shows, and the experience of these two countries shows, that when you have open lists, it stimulates a lot of internal competition. In Brazil, this has been not favorable to women, because women have to compete against male other candidates who have generally a lot more resources. And I want to also speak about a term that some of you might find a bit surprising. It's very commonly used here. Now, if I translate into English, it might not make very much sense, but basically it's called candidata laranja, which literally means orange candidate. And this is a scourge in Brazil. What is an orange candidate? It is a woman who is only running for show. All political parties in Brazil across the political spectrum, both on the right and the left, use orange candidates, mostly female, almost exclusively female, in order to meet their quota, which is 30%. Brazil has not embraced the principle of gender parity. So to meet that 30%, which is a legal requirement, they use these orange candidates, and they give them money, because 30% of the party fund also technically has to flow towards female candidates. But what they do is they have a false female candidate, and that money then flows to a real candidate who has a real chance of winning. And research was done just for these last elections, the 2004, and across the board, over 30% of all candidates were what they call these orange candidates. Some parties had as high a percentage as 65% orange candidates. So there's still a lot of loopholes in Brazil, and that is why we have such a low level still currently. And with no hope in sight, because the most recent terrible step is that the Brazilian Congress, for the fourth time, passed an amnesty, a general collective amnesty for all political parties who had been fined, because electoral authorities have fined political parties for not respecting the gender quota. But then what Congress does is it passes an amnesty, revoking the fines and saying political parties, it's okay. It's a bit like absolution in the Catholic Church. It's all going to be okay. We're just going to wash away all, the lack of compliance. So I want to conclude by saying from this experience of having now lived and worked in South America and Latin America, and have compared different Latin American countries, what do I see as what's really important, and what could I think the UK could adopt? What could make not just the UK, but all countries that currently are stuck in the very undemocratic first past the post? So first, the type of PR is important. And this is very interesting because, Deputy Christina Olumeko mentioned about, open list can work. In the case of Brazil, it has been very difficult for women to make headway with the open list and to make it to the top. So the type of PR, whether it's closed or open list, and also crucially, something also the deputy mentioned, is having a zipper system where you have alternation of candidates, including having a rule that Mexico has that you must alternate who is the top 1 and 2. So not just vertical, but horizontal parity. Secondly, that you have to have gender quotas. So it's not just enough to have PR. You must have gender quotas, and it's not just enough to have gender quotas. You have to have gender parity. Fourth, the electoral authorities have to really have teeth so that they could, override any sort of amnesty like Brazil is passing. In Mexico, that's been the case. The electoral authorities have been very strict, and they have consistently voted in favor of maintaining and expanding gender equity. And finally, I think cross-party, cross-ideological collaboration is so critical. In Mexico, across the ideological spectrum from left to right, women came together and they all said, okay, we may disagree on, let's say, the level of intervention government intervention in the economy, we do agree that female political representation is good for democracy. It's good for our country. In Brazil, unfortunately, women on the right, in part due to this very strong influence of the evangelical church, they do not agree with gender quotas. And so there's a disconnect between the left and the right. There's not across the board agreement. So I think I just wanted to end saying with these five, I think having them, it's a lot, because if you don't even have PR yet, and you have many votes, but just to start, even to combine thinking, if you have a vote, let's have a vote right away with PR combined with, 50% gender parity to begin with. Thank you.
Well, you've thrown down the gauntlet to us there, Kathryn. I hope we can all accept it. One of the questions that came in earlier, I'd like to touch on, because Kathryn, you talked about people coming together and talking about some things. And Christina, someone asked, does Denmark still have a summer gathering of all parties to discuss politics and talk to one another?
Yes, we do. And for those of you who don't know it, translated to English, it would be called the People's Meeting, Folkemøde in Danish. So it's a big summer gathering at an island called Bornholm, and all political parties join this meeting, and also most organizations, or even some companies. And then we have a tent. Every company, every party, every organization have a tent, and then we have talks, debates, cooking competitions, DJ battles, and discuss politics for 4 days. So politicians go there and talk with people. It's great.
It's just fascinating and so different from the way our culture operates in the UK politics. We have got quite a few questions, but I am keen to hear from people. So if you've got one, please put your hand up. But Donna, right at the beginning when you were talking, and I think it was because you're a pollster, someone actually asked, and I think it's a great question, do women tend to vote in a particular way? And flip side, do men tend to vote in a particular way in your experience?
Well, I can certainly draw on 30 years in the polling business to say that often there is a gender gap in voting, and we see that now in Canada. We've seen it over all the years that I've been polling. So typically, women are more likely to vote for center-left parties, and men are more likely to vote for center-right parties. It's as simple as that. And sometimes the gender gap is larger or smaller, but that in fact is the pattern we've seen in Canada for many years. I think it's probably the same in other countries. I don't want to assume that for a fact, but I've seen some international polling data that would suggest that as well. But yeah, there is. As I said earlier, when it comes to issues and orientations, we also tend to see a gender gap too, with women more likely to look to government policies. Women are more interested and supportive of policies with respect to healthcare, education, social services. And one of the biggest gender gaps I've seen is in areas of defense spending. Women are not interested in spending on defense, and there's a huge gender gap I've seen over the years on that issue as well. So there's a lot of that issue kind of polling too. So yeah.
And does that reflect the same? Because Christina's nodding. Is that the same? And have you found that in your research as well, Kathryn? Christina, please.
Yeah. It's the same in Denmark. Yeah, I just want to say the same. It's the same. And for my party, well, most women vote on us, and I think that's why we have 80% women in the group in our parliament. So yeah, I can see the same picture of Denmark.
Mm-hmm. Kathryn?
In Brazil, it's not just about women, but women across with income, and especially with religion. You see, and I just saw a comment by someone about a huge number of women voting for Trump. We saw a huge number of women voting for Bolsonaro, but not all women. It was more low-income women with lower education, and above all, evangelical women who would be told by their pastors to vote for Trump because he was in favor of the traditional family.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I've got someone iPhone, Bill. Did you want to come off mute and ask your question? You need to come off mute, Bill. I can't quite hear you.
Hello?
There we are.
Oh, good. It's about the relationship between gender parity and PR systems. I mean, the emphasis already there. Closed lists plus gender quotas are the ideal combination. But in the UK, the principal advocacy is for the single transferable vote, and that performs very badly in terms of gender parity. I mean, in the last Irish election, despite a gender quota, 40% of candidates to be female, the outcome was only a quarter of Irish MPs are women. So I just wondered what your views were on what would be the best PR system for the UK, and what's your views on STV?
Thank you. Do any of the panelists have a response to that?
Well, I would say, I mean, I'm not an expert on this. We have in a couple of the referendums that we've had at the provincial level in Canada, I think one of them was on STV, and I read the same thing as well, that it didn't actually help women very much. But it seems to me, from just listening to Christina and Kathryn, I think they both laid out the qualities of a system that is best. I mean, I think, you know, we're talking about a PR which has closed or alternative lists, and seeking gender parity, and electoral authorities that have strength, that have powers to enforce. I think these are the systems that seem to be doing the best. I'm just drawing on what I've read over the years, and also your excellent comments, both of you, on this, on your systems. I'm jealous.
Yes, I am too.
We're not even close here
not
to
even
getting
close.
this. And you, I don't know, and the British, I don't know if you're close either, Emma. So
Well, so the public are more keen on PR than the politicians, but obviously, as we often find, politicians will say they like PR, get elected, and then want to do something different. If you don't, I'd love to jump to Carolina's question, which I think that Christina and Kathryn have both spied and have got something they would like to say. I'm just going to précis it, but saying that success for politics for white and non-white politicians, is there a difference between access and success? But also, is there a risk of focusing on gender parity and then overlooking intersectionality? And I know that, Christina, you've been thinking about this, and you've done some work about that in the past. So have either of you got any reflections on that?
Yes, I do. And as I said before, this is still a big issue in Danish politics. Well, when it comes to party membership in Denmark, as I mentioned, the party membership is very low. Only 2% of the Danish population is a member of a Danish party. And it's even worse when it comes to ethnic minorities. So there's a small, almost non-existing pool to get candidates from when it comes to minorities in general, especially ethnic minorities. And my party is trying to recruit people. I think we have a problem. You may know Denmark a little bit, and we are. I think it's fair to say that we are quite a nationalistic conservative party when it comes to including ethnic minorities in our society, and I think that has affected the representation in the parliament. For instance, many ethnic minorities can't vote for the election. We're one of the countries in Europe with the most people above the age of 18 that can't vote. It's 10% of the population. And I think that affects the party membership, and also, of course, politicians. So I think that's the biggest issue, that our policies exclude certain populations.
Disappointing, but something that obviously can be worked on. Kathryn, as an anthropologist, is there anything you would like to add to that?
Oh, I think this is an excellent question, Carolina. Thank you. In Brazil, we have what is known also as racial quotas, and the term used is racial, not ethnic. It's also 30% quota for what are known as black and brown or pardo candidates, as well as 30% of the party funds that have to go. So you actually have gender and racial quotas at the same time. In Mexico, some states have also introduced intersectional quotas. So within, let's say, if there's like an Afro Mexican quota, within that there'll be a gender quota. So if you have to, let's say, whatever the quota is for Afro Mexicans or African ancestry, then there will be a gender quota within that. So in some, that's not national, but that's at the state level. In Brazil, it's national. And it's a lot more difficult to have the orange candidates, although with the pardo category, you still are getting orange, or they call these candidatos laranja, the orange candidates. But Brazil, I will just briefly say Brazil, 50% of all seats in public universities across the whole country are reserved for Black, Brown, and Indigenous candidates from state schools. So it's a very sort of, there's a lot of intersectionality already, is particularly in Brazil, because Brazil is a brown and Black majority country, even demographically, even though that's not reflected in politics. And I just wanted to say, in addition to the closed list, there's something else that's really important, that is the zipper. Some of you may be familiar, that it's not just about the closed list, but the positioning on that, and that, you know, having the zipper, the alternation, and then also making sure that that you also even mandating that you have to have women at the very top as well. You can't always put the woman, you know, at the second level. So I think that, you know, because I think the Irish case is quite, you know, maybe quite unique. But yeah, thank you very much for the question, Carolina. I think it's really important we have intersectionality, and also increasingly there's discussion in Brazil around LGBTQ candidates because of the huge massive amount of homophobia, transphobia in the country.
Thank you. And I know obviously in Canada, there was quite a big issue around First Nation representation, wasn't there, Donna? And is that, do you feel fixed, or do we feel there's still a long way to go with that?
I think there is a long way to go for sure, and of course we don't have any quota systems here at all for politics for any group, whether it be women, Indigenous peoples, racial minorities, or whatever. We don't have any system, any legislation or any quotas that deal with any of this at the political level. So yes, it's definitely an issue. Now we in our Senate is appointed. It's like the upper chamber in Britain. We're appointed. We do have significant representation in the Senate of Indigenous peoples, but it's an appointment system, so that has been taken into account, I think, quite well. But electoral in the elected House of Commons, no.
Again, a long way to go. So we there was, I'm trying to scroll back up. Obviously, Donna and I, we briefly chatted about this before the meeting, that the former Prime Minister Trudeau said he regretted not bringing electoral change in his term in office. Do you think he can be persuaded to join the campaign for electoral reform now?
Oh, gee, I don't know. I mean, Prime Minister Trudeau has just left office 1 week ago, and I guess it seems to have expressed a certain regret for not going forward with electoral reform. He did not favor PR. As it turned out, he favored what's called a ranked ballot, which is not PR at all. That's what he would have wanted when he was thinking about electoral reform. But still, I think we have a long way to go in terms of that. I don't know whether I should try to answer this question, but I do see in the chat, what can we learn from the referenda being unsuccessful in Canada, the UK?
Yes.
I can just speak about that briefly, if that's
Please do.
of interest. The referendum I'm most familiar with was the one here in the province of Ontario. Ontario is 40% of the Canadian population. We had a referendum on PR in 2007, so this is a long time ago. And it came from a citizens' assembly in this province that recommended mixed member proportional form of PR. And then the campaign came and there was a referendum, and it just never broke through. I mean, it was stuck at 1/3 support and 2/3 against MMP, mixed member proportional, and it never changed. And the fact of the matter was that Ontarians did not feel that our current system of elections was unfair. They felt that it provided fair outcomes to the parties, and the supporters of it were never able to break through that thinking, and so that was the barrier. I can't say, I don't exactly know how to break through that barrier, but people just continued to believe that the system, because they saw alternation of the parties in power in the province. They saw, conservatives were in power, New Democrats were in power, liberals were in power. And I think they had a sense that, there was a fairness in the sense that different parties could get elected through our system. Never broke through that barrier of perception that our system was not fair to the parties.
Thank you. I was just quickly looking. There's been some more questions, of course. A very easy one, hopefully, for you, Kathryn. But have you published your findings about Brazil and Mexico yet? Asks Sue, who is a stalwart of our campaign.
So actually, I published another article, but it actually wasn't about Brazil and Mexico. I was looking at other countries. I was looking at Spain, is where I've also lived, and New Zealand. I was looking at other countries who have shown the way in terms of zipper lists, and specifically New Zealand, because it's sort of a hybrid system. What Senator Dasko was just mentioning. But in the future, something will be in the cards, in the works, because I think it's a very interesting comparison.
Sue has popped her hand up, so Sue, please do unmute and come in.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Kathryn. Yeah, well, I'd also be interested in anything you published on New Zealand and what was the other country. Are you able to just put reference in the chat or something? Thank you. You're on mute. You're on mute.
I will do. Yeah, it was. Sorry. The other country was Spain, and I'll put. I think. Yeah, I will put it, or maybe I don't know. Yeah, let me find it and I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I happened to be in New Zealand when for the 1999 election, the first one under PR, which I have to admit I didn't realise was, but it was very exciting because I think they were the first Maori MPs, for example. Amazing. And I also happened to be in Brazil during a general election, and I was astonished that they have votes at 16, compulsory voting, electronic voting, and they vote on Sundays, all sorts of sensible things that we would love to have, but don't. Anyway, so it's really interesting. Thank you very much.
There is a lot to fix about our democracy. Ruby's asked a question. I don't know, Ruby, do you feel brave enough to unmute and ask it, or shall I read it out? Just give her a second. Okay, you might be able to see. I'm going to just give a quick précis. So Ruby's an 18-year-old student and finds a big gap between male and female when it comes to ideas of reformation. And women go down that path and activism, whereas men tend to be more skeptic about radical change. I'm sure other people, I can see Kathryn's reading in detail, and Christina is looking inquisitively. So I was wondering if people have got any thoughts about sort of systematic discrimination, and radical change being the only options. Who would like to address that first?
I just
Kathryn,
think it's I just think it's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that, in terms of sort of incremental. I think sometimes I think both Mexico and Brazil have initially had to start with incremental because they wouldn't have, they couldn't have started with 50%, and it can be difficult, I think, because you have to get party elites on board. And remember, both, Brazil had a military dictatorship, and Mexico for years it was a one-party state. It was only after democratization that systems could open up. I do think that for many countries, without obligatory both gender and racial quotas or ethnic minority quotas, it's difficult to get the change. And we see it in the UK, in the city. You just read the statistics, and if it's, and now that they're even being watered down, we see the attacks on DEI. If it's just left up to, well, we're just going to write an annual report, or we don't, I think it needs to be more of, radical change. Now, I don't know, though, about, women versus men supporting more of the radical change. I do think definitely in Brazil, I think you'd have more women saying, look, we need the radical change. We just need, we need a law that's going to be very, very strict. Otherwise, we're just not going to see the change in our lifetime for our daughters, for our granddaughters.
Thank you. Christina.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure if there's in a Danish context is a difference between men and women when it comes to radical change, but I definitely agree that we have to improve our democracy, and even maybe in radical ways. So as we touched upon before, there's different problems with democracy, but also, as you can hear, in Denmark, we have problems with engaging people. And I have to say, what's going on in the US right now is something that I think could happen in Denmark in many years, and we have maybe a way of thinking where we take democracy for given. And as I said before, I think in a Danish context, we need to find other platforms to involve people. We can't just rely on the political parties when only 2% think that parties are good enough for them. So we need to involve our democracy.
Absolutely. Donna, do you have any additional reflections?
Well, I agree, especially with Christina, in terms of the approach. We do need to keep our democracy strong and make it stronger, because we are being faced with threats, disinformation, and other developments that we've never really experienced before. So I think that increasing the representation of women and minority populations is a way to make the democracy stronger. That it's an important way to strengthen the democracy. We should think of it that way, along with other issues that we have to think about, with respect to what's happening in the world now and how it's going to affect our own country. So this is part of it. I think this is a positive way. If we had more representative democracy, I think we'd have a stronger democracy in all of our countries, and mine included.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Pauline, do you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Yeah, so good evening. I'm Pauline from the UK. I would consider that the law is out of date in the UK, and there is definitely an apathy towards voting. And I really like the the comment from the New Zealand. I thought that was a really great idea, that voting should be made much easier and much more accessible. And voting from 16, I think, is a good idea. But I think there should definitely be more equality. It should be much easier to vote, either online or postal, because it's bizarre. We close all these institutions to vote. That does seem a rather costly exercise when we could do it from home, or on the go if you have an internet connection. We definitely need more gender equality and a more inclusive society. And there are people that cannot vote because they can't be registered to vote, because they don't understand the system, or they get turned away from the polling station because they haven't got photo ID, or they have communication needs and they're not given the help to vote in privacy. This is madness. You're excluding people from voting that should be included. We got people that are housebound. They're not online. They're not on the phone. Unless somebody can help them, fill in the form. If you've got somebody that cannot sign or make a mark, for example, that is a big challenge. There's too much discrimination. It should be the same right for everyone.
Yes, thank you.
And people should be registered automatically. If you're registered with the government and you have permission to stay or you're born in that country, then when you reach voting age, you should be automatically enrolled. It's not this system where we don't know about it, so we don't apply. Or if we are living in another part of the world and we can vote in our home country, there's a big logistical problem. There's so many simple things that could make it much fairer. And I think if we think internationally and share good ideas, that's the way forward. Because every country must make their own decision.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're doing today, isn't it? Learning internationally. So Pauline just gave us a tour de force about how to improve voting. Does anyone have any thoughts, agreements, or challenges about what she just said? Donna, do you have automatic voter registration in Canada?
No, we don't. And we've just been told we're not getting it either. So, I mean, automatic voting online. No, we don't have voting online. And I think some people, I think the chief electoral officer, the election commission we have in Canada, they're reluctant to do that because there's still some suspicion about the systems, and I think there's suspicion that the systems can be broken into, and so there's a lot of those kinds of ideas floating around that are probably not based on any reality, but still they tend to affect the environment on these things. So we haven't moved there yet. Although there is, I mean, we have greater hours to vote and accessibility of voting stations, and those are changes that we have seen in the last few years. So it's more accessible in that respect. But in terms of electronic voting, it's not on the cards right now.
I'm going to just quickly ask one last question, because Samuel James asked a really great question about whether particularly the people who've witnessed first past the post and PR have noticed how candidates and MPs conduct themselves during those processes and whether it's different for PR. So do we think people are better when they campaign under PR, basically? Silence. Go on, Kathryn, do you want to unmute?
Okay. Well, I saw that question. I thought that was really interesting because I grew up under first past the post, and I can more respond from more of a personal perspective because under first past the post, I never felt my vote counted and often didn't count depending on where I lived. In terms of how they conduct themselves. Was someone speaking? Sorry.
Yeah, I think I muted them. Sorry, carry on. I think someone just came off me.
In terms of how candidates conduct themselves, I cannot see any discernible difference. I think the way that campaigns are conducted are similar regardless of the political system. But the support, obviously the support available, and how your actual chances both to be elected and also for us to elect. For a voter to elect a party you want. In Brazil, if you want to vote for the Greens, it doesn't matter where you live in the country. If you want to vote, it doesn't matter. Your vote will count because it's not linked to a particular constituency. But I had personally not seen any difference in behavior, gender, or otherwise. And just very briefly about accessibility, many cities in Brazil on the voting day, public transport is free. The municipalities have to vote for this, but the whole idea is accessibility. Many Brazilians, it's expensive to take the bus, and so it is obligatory in most cities for the public transport to be free on voting day.
Fantastic. Christina, is there something similar in Denmark? You're nodding.
Yeah, maybe just to add a few words. In Denmark, you don't have to register. So you get an electoral card with post, and then you go down to your local school and vote. So it's kind of easy, I would say. We have a voter turnout at about 80%. So it's good, but at local elections, it's about 50%. So we want that up. But otherwise, it's going okay with that.
Thank you. we might have 60 seconds. I was going to say one more question. I don't know if we really have. I'm just looking through all of this. I think possibly instead I will take this as an opportunity to say thank you so much for your contributions. The conversation in the chat box has been really terrific as well. And you can tell that people have really engaged with this subject and asked them lots of questions. And there are so many things we didn't talk about. And I think maybe one day we'll ask you all to come back. Once maybe Canada and the UK have got PR, maybe we can come back and have a party and talk about what we're going to do next. So I'd like to just thank you on behalf of everyone here for all your contributions tonight. And please do let us know if we can do anything to help you at any point. Thank you, everyone, and good evening.